A simple question. If right now someone took away all the clothes on your body, how many hours would you last? In an ordinary winter, maybe a few hours. In an Ice Age winter, maybe 1 hour, maybe less. This is exactly the situation our ancestors faced. Not once, not one season, for thousands of generations. And yet, here we are. When we talk about the Ice Age, many people's minds go to a cold afternoon. The reality was much different. The last Ice Age reached its peak about 26,000 years ago. Massive sheets of ice covered a large part of Europe, Asia, and North America. The land was flat, frozen, and completely open. Nothing blocked the wind. Finding trees was hard. Food could disappear for months, and the cold could take down a human within a few hours. The problem is, we weren't built for these conditions.
Humans are a heat-loving creature from the depths of Africa. We have no thick fur, no fat layer like a seal, and we can't hibernate like a bear. The animals around us were built exactly for these conditions. Mammoths had fur and fat. Cave bears could sleep through the winter. Reindeer could migrate. We had none of these. On paper, humans should have been the first thing to die out in the cold. But we had one thing many animals didn't: a brain that could see the problem and hands that could build the solution. The first and most important solution was fire. Humans had been using fire for at least 300,000 to 400,000 years. When the Ice Age arrived, fire was no longer a tool, it was the foundation of survival. Archaeologists in Ukraine found hearths whose temperatures exceeded 600 degrees Celsius. These weren't primitive fires, these were engineered fires. When wood became scarce, they used animal bone and fat as fuel. Fire kept them warm, cooked their food, hardened their tools, and gave them more light on days when the sun shone for only a few hours. But fire had one problem. You couldn't carry it everywhere. So humans did something no animal could. They stripped other animals' warmth from their bodies and put it on themselves. At first it was simple. They draped animal hides over their shoulders. We have evidence that from 300,000 years ago in northern Europe, humans skinned bears to obtain their fur. We know this from cut marks on the bones of bears' paws, exactly where they're needed for cleanly removing the hide. But a loose hide simply thrown over the body lets heat escape through every gap. For a true ice age, this wasn't enough. The solution was found about 30,000 years ago. A thin piece of bone or ivory with a small hole in it. The sewing needle. One scientist called it perhaps the most important invention in human history, and for good reason. The needle meant sewing was now possible. Body-fitted clothing, closed seams, sleeves that covered the wrists. The difference between a blanket over the shoulders and a coat that fit the body exactly was this very needle. Early modern humans likely had better clothing than Neanderthals, and this could be one of the reasons for their survival through the harshest cold periods. But clothing wasn't enough either if you had nowhere to stay. In some regions, humans built something still astonishing today: houses made of mammoth bone. In Ukraine and Eastern Europe, archaeologists found the remains of structures 15,000 to 20,000 years old. They were built from hundreds of large mammoth bones, jaws, ribs, leg bones, even skulls. Wood was scarce, but mammoths were there, and each mammoth provided a huge amount of material. A mammoth bone house wasn't just a shelter, it was a carefully calculated group project. Their design was also clever. The entrance was dug lower than the sleeping area because cold air is heavier and stays right at the entrance, while warm air rises. They understood this thousands of years before anyone wrote the mechanism down on paper. They even used snow itself as insulation.
Thick snow walls around the shelter kept the inside temperature near zero, even when the outside air reached -30.
Staying warm solved the problem of that one night. But winter lasted for months, and its slower enemy was hunger. For months, there was almost nothing to gather or hunt. So humans learned to store food in advance. When a big hunt succeeded, they didn't eat it all right away. They smoked the meat, dried it, and stored it in underground pits, where the soil itself preserved the cold. There's even evidence they weighted mammoth meat down and submerged it in frozen ponds, a natural refrigerator. Nothing went to waste. Hide became clothing, bone became tools, fat became fuel, meat became food.
The most important animal of the Ice Age was the woolly mammoth. Not just a food source, a complete walking store. Meat for eating, fat for energy and fuel, hide for covering, bone for tools and building. A single mammoth could support an entire group for a long time. But hunting it wasn't simple. A mammoth weighed many times more than a human. So they had to be smart. They used the strength of the group, predicted the animal's path, and coordinated with one another. In eastern France, Ice Age hunters used fire and teamwork to drive entire herds into natural traps. Not just once, for thousands of years, at the same spot, again and again. Human strength wasn't in the muscles, it was in cooperation. Even so, life in the Ice Age remained brutally hard. One small mistake could be fatal. An injury while hunting, losing the fire, a severe storm. In such conditions, being part of a group was a necessity, not a choice. Every person had an important role. One was a skilled hunter, one made better tools, one had experience finding the way. Older people, even if they could no longer hunt, held valuable knowledge. They knew where water was, which plants were edible, and when animals migrated. Humans didn't survive by physical strength alone. They survived by passing on knowledge. At night, around the fire, one told stories, one repaired tools, children learned, and elders passed on their experience.
Perhaps it was the cold that forced humans to grow closer to one another. One important question remains. Did the human body itself also adapt to the cold? The answer is yes, but not in the way you'd think. We didn't grow fur like a bear or store fat like a seal. The human body found a different path, which scientists call cultural adaptation, meaning instead of changing the body, we changed our surrounding environment. An Arctic wolf needs fur to live in the cold. A human in that same environment can survive with the right clothing and a warm shelter. This was our greatest evolutionary innovation, not changing ourselves, but changing the world around us.
And now, the strangest hypothesis in this story. At an archaeological site in Spain called Cima de los Huesos, or Pit of Bones, scientists examined ancestors dating back about 430,000 years. Their bones were strange. The damage appeared periodically, growth that would stop and start again, signs of insufficient sunlight. This is exactly the pattern seen in hibernating animals. Some scientists have suggested that during harsh winters, these people may have put their bodies into a kind of deep sleep to use less energy. This theory isn't confirmed yet. Many scientists disagree with it. But the idea is compelling enough that it's still being investigated.
For hundreds of thousands of years, reaching spring was never guaranteed. Every winter was a test you might fail, and failing meant death. Humans were not the fastest, not the biggest, had no sharp teeth, no powerful claws, but they had something many creatures didn't: the ability to think, the ability to cooperate, the ability to build, and the ability to learn from the past. Every fire they lit, every piece of clothing they sewed, every shelter they built was one more step on the path of survival. They triumphed over winter, not because they defeated nature, but because they learned to live with it. And perhaps the greatest lesson of this story is this: humanity's greatest tool was not its hands, nor its body. It was its mind. What do you think? If you were in that same situation right now with no modern tools, where would you start first? Tell us in the comments.